All right, recording is on. This is day 3, Wednesday, April 22nd of the PTG for Cinder. We are going to start with RBD encryption. Feel free to launch into it.
So I don't know if the person that was proposing this is here, but I read up on it a bit.
This name is not in our RC channel. I'm not sure. I don't have any contact information other than that. Let me see if I can dig up something. But Eric, do you go ahead?
I'll tell you kind of what I saw so far. I was trying to pull up his email, but I can't seem to load my email right now. So the proposal, as I understand it, was to, instead of using the QEMU layer to handle RBD encryption, there's an alternative way to do it where librd will let you call, I think they call them RBD encryption load, and it's still a LUKS-based system. The decryption would still be happening in a process, near the instance, but it would be happening, I think, in some part of librd instead of QEMU. And the motivation there, let me open the link again, was that this supposedly performs better. There's some trade-offs to doing this, I think, that would affect some of our functionality. But the biggest question I have about this is, if we're doing LUKS in user space, why is this faster than what we do now? Like, there's no obvious reason to me that this should just perform better. So I'm a little unsure what to make of the performance claims there, unless there's some explanation of like why we actually think it would perform better. Because I'm concerned that a simple test would, I don't know if the layer that the encryption is happening at in the QEMU IO path shifts some of it out a little bit further, and maybe it has some effects on caching and how IO happens at the VM layer from inside the VM that makes it hard to measure. I don't know. If we can, demonstrate that it's significantly faster, we might want to look at it. But I don't know why it would be. I don't know why it would perform better is the main thing I'm trying to figure out so far. Unless there's just something wrong with QEMU. I'm not sure.
In the email, they say that they're seeing like 68% on IOPS reduction, but it would be nice to have some more details on that, right?
Yeah, measuring that kind of stuff is notoriously quite hard to do. The other side of this is that I think it would lose our ability to do rekey when you clone a volume. It is interesting that it says it supports LUKS 2, because the QEMU path does not support LUKS 2 yet. So if we end up with some actual security regulatory reason that LUKS 2 is interesting, that might be valuable. But I just don't know. I mean, the whole motivation for this is that it's supposed to be way faster. But either way, you have a user space process perform an AES LUKS encryption inside of QEMU. If everything works correctly, it seems like it should be about the same as what we do now, performance-wise. So I think we have to really do some testing and figure out what's going on there and justify if it's really a whole lot faster. Like, do we need to fix what we have currently or what? Or maybe if there is some reason that it's a lot faster, we should try to use it. I don't know.
I mean, I have no details, but like, is it related to like lesser number of kernel and user space switching in librd compared to like the QEMU native encryption?
Well, both of them are fully in user space, right? So I wouldn't think so.
Don't they require any sort of privileged execution of some command to be able to decrypt the block device? Or it's not the block device in case of SEF RBD. Yeah,
it's just a TCP protocol inside of QEMU. So I've never tried to use this RBD functionality, so I don't know a ton about it other than just what I was reading about in the docs from Ceph.
If we assume that there is a significant performance improvement, what about the issue of how keys are managed? Is this is this compatible with our model of encryption, or is there some sort of change that we're going to need to make in order to potentially make use of this? If we assume that the performance is worth considering migrating to it.
I mean, we would definitely have to rework how we handle RBD volumes. I think the way that this works is that you call. So what I think what happens is you call RBD, you call into librd and you open a connection and open your image. And then after you've done that, there's another method you can call that's RBD encryption load, and it like loads up the encryption layer on top of the RBD image that you've opened to do the LUKS decryption layer. Which actually, and you pass in a passphrase there. So, I mean, we could rework stuff from Cinder to do all that. I guess we would have to make sure that Nova can, I mean, Nova would have to add a bunch of code for this too, and QEMU would need to support it, but it must have some kind of support for it already if the guy tested it. But actually, now that I say that, how would he have tested it with the Nova instance?
Also, the email doesn't mention like the version of LUKS used, like it's LUKS v1 or v2. Right now, from Nova perspective, we only support LUKS v1, and for LUKS v2, we rely on, at least for other block devices, we rely on crypt setup and like de-encrypt. So, is it possible like he tested one LUKS version and another, like two different versions there?
Well, I'm a lot more concerned about the performance claims now, because to have tested this in a like-to-like scenario with what we do currently, it implies that there's like Nova code sitting around somewhere that can do this, which I have never seen. So we probably need to ask some questions about what kind of test was actually done. I guess he could have tested it with just QEMU.
Also, are there ongoing efforts to support Lux v2 with QEMU, like the native encryption decryption? Because I mean, we keep mentioning this security loophole where when with decrypt we open the device, like we create, like override the path of the device with the unencrypted device, and sometimes due to like connection errors, and if the LUN gets unmapped, then we can still sometimes leave the not the LUN getting unmapped, but sometimes we could leave the unencrypted device on the host. That opens security loopholes. So I think that still needs to be addressed for other block devices relying on the decrypt.
Well, the Lux v2 restriction for RBD is that the QEMU block layer only supports Lux v1 for encryption. If you're doing host attachment with iSCSI, I think you can use it. I think you can use Lux v2. We haven't done much testing or anything, but I think that might be possible already. But I haven't seen any evidence that anybody has been working on adding Lux v2 support to the QEMU block layer. So I'm not too sure where to go with this whole, I mean, it kind of hinges currently on actually proving that it performs a whole lot better, I think. And if it does, then it's probably worth looking into working on it. But I'm kind of skeptical that it performs a whole lot faster, having not seen any tests or data or anything. I guess we'd also need to think through if there's any other functionality impacts.
All right, so it sounds like if someone were interested in coming forward and working on this or investigating it, we would certainly be interested. But right now, there's lots of questions and some skepticism and a lack of clarity on what actually is needed. And does that sound about right? Do we want to move on, or is there more on this topic?
I mean, that's about right. The author of the email said he'd be interested in contributing. So there's that. And then in Sean's response, he just said, you know, to get the performance right, you got to balance hardware and the versions of different tools properly. Otherwise, you just don't know what you're going to see. So that might be why this person's seeing really bad performance. I don't know.
Well, that mail thread also veered into KRBD, which is like a whole different thing. And it's, I don't know, when I first read the proposal before anybody had replied to it, I was pretty confused because I thought we were talking again about KRBD versus librd.
Yeah, I'm reading it like the original, the author is not talking about KRBD. I think Sean brings this in, but I'm not sure that actually has anything to do with what he's proposing.
No, it doesn't. It's a thing.
Actually, I might have brought that in because it wasn't the workaround in Nova to use KRBD for a while.
Yeah, when there was an actual like software reason that QEMU wasn't performing as well as it was supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at that time, librd did not have support for this, so we weren't able to have this discussion.
Oh yeah, yeah. This whole feature that is being proposed, I think the Ceph docs said it was added in Ceph Pacific, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
So in the mail, it looks like when like in his section when he talks about the gap, the biggest thing is per tenant keys versus per image keys. Couldn't we just use the tenant key for each of the images?
Well, we use per image keys now.
Why is he saying that that's a problem then?
Because I mean, that's the same either way, because we already do provision a new encryption key for each volume.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the gap is then. I guess someone just needs to work through it and come up with a spec or iterate through it, and hopefully we arrive at something like a spec if it's possible.
I would be surprised if we spent some time digging into performance tests if we didn't find that it ends up being about the same as what we have now, because architecturally that seems like what should happen. I mean, you're encrypting and decrypting data in the same format, approximately in the same place. You're just doing it in library A versus library B right next to library A in the same process. That's why I'm so baffled by the 60 to 80% difference in IOPS claim. Like it should be about the same, I would think, unless there's just some weird bug somewhere.
Well, the interesting thing was usually when there's something like this, somebody will reply and say, yeah, I saw really bad performance too, and this is what I did, or you just have to live with it, and nobody said anything. So that's just a data point.
Well, I mean, if it is about like RBD encryptions with like empty volumes in that scenarios, I think that is something we see. But I think me or Roger already have patches around that for empty when it's empty cases. But yeah, nothing else, I guess.
Also, Nova expects us to format like the empty volume. So when we create a bootable volume from image, encrypted volume, then we format it, put the image into it. Format it with the Lux format or that command. But in case of raw empty volumes, we don't do the same. So Nova has to do it. Nova again calls, I think, Westbrook to do it. But it is an expectation, at least Nova's expectation from Cinder side, to be doing it for both the cases. That is.
Yeah, that one's tricky because I understand that it would be nice from Nova's point of view if encrypted volumes were already formatted. But if we went and we made that change, the first thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to say, I created 1,000 volumes at the same time, and it took a whole lot longer than it used to. Because under that proposal with iSCSI volumes, you have to attach them on the Cinder volume node and format them with Lux and then detach them and then attach them on the compute node. Whereas currently we only attach them once on the compute node. So it makes sense, I think, that Nova would like to receive the volumes that way. But I'm almost certain that somebody would be upset that the process now takes longer to create and attach them.
But is it the expectation from like empty volumes? Like generally when we create VM workloads with bootable volumes, in that case, Cinder is already formatting them. We have to attach the volume already to write the image. That is again like it will happen anyway. So we rather format it.
Well, Nova many years ago was asking us to do this for empty volumes too, was what I had in mind when I was saying that.
Yeah, but do customers or end users create like hundreds of empty volumes? Because these are external data volumes, not like the main disk to.
I don't know. It's a cloud API. I always just assume anything you can dream up, somebody's going to do it.
Yeah, but I get the point. Like attaching the volume just for the sake of like formatting it seems like an overhead that would add to the performance.
But that's not like a reason that we haven't done this. It's more just that we just never really dug into it that much. And I think Nova kind of stopped asking about it for a while.
Yeah, I still see.
Well, I was going to ask, what is the general state of our encryption functionality? Are we like feature complete on that? I vaguely remember a while ago there being some issues with resizing and things like that. I wonder, was Sophie's work did we ever land that? Is that all in good shape? Or is are we just looking at potentially updating to like librd potentially if the performance is good, or do we have like other basic gaps that are still need to be completed? I'm wondering if
well, as far as the functionality as a whole, we're in pretty good shape. I think we never finished the whole fixing the problem of how you account for encryption header size, and the fact that some drivers do it one way and some drivers do it the other way, which leads to the problem with migration. There was a very simple proposal for how to fix that, which was to add a flag to the migration operation that said, basically bump up the size of the destination by 1 GB if you need to make it fit. And I think we had some pretty good support around doing that, but I don't think we ever actually landed that functionality. But that really only comes up if you're migrating volumes. I forget if it's iSCSI to Ceph or Ceph to iSCSI, which direction is the way that causes you to run into that. The only other real hole about encryption in general is that we need to fix up a couple things on the generic NFS driver with it, which is driver specific stuff. But I don't think we're missing a lot of, broad functionality kind of things. I don't really recall that anybody has complained about any or worked on any really in the last couple of years.
okay.
There's some broader discussion about encryption algorithms in the post-quantum computing world. Based on the current standards and aims of all of that work, the stuff that we're using currently is considered fine, at least for now.
All right, do we have more on encryption, or should we move to the next topic?
Do we have actions here?
I think the main thing was to ask the person who's worried about this to confirm the performance degradation, so we can get a better understanding. Because if it's as bad as he says, then we're probably going to want to do something. But it seems like we don't have. So I don't know if there's anything for us to do other than somebody could respond, I guess, to the thread and just say we discussed it. They can look at the recording to see how exciting the discussion was, and then try to give us some better benchmarking or something.
All right, I can respond to the thread and do that. So we can, well, I guess we're 10 minutes over. So we can switch to volume and snapshot migrations, unless anyone has anything else to add on this particular topic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome. The floor is yours.
Okay, this is Fudi, and yeah, I okay, share my screen.
Good work. Yes. I don't see why not.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, I have created a blueprint. Yeah, this is for proposing an enhancement to Cinder volume migration to allow migrating a volume together with all of its snapshots between different backends while the VM is running, preserving the lineage of snapshots. This is the please look at the left figure. This is the current workflow of volume migration. If the volume has snapshots, the volume migration will fail. Look at the figure in the right side. This is we propose the improvement. If the snapshot exists, we will migrate the snapshot based Cinder, then use the you use the vendor's driver or the current scheme to do the volume migration, and then update Cinder volume metadata. Here we will like to divide this spec into the following 3 situations for the volume snapshot. Yeah, the first is a volume with available status. It's not attached to any VM. And the second one is a date volume of VM with an EU status. And the third is a system volume of a VM with an EU status. I would like to introduce two use cases. The first one is data center maintenance or backend upgraded. For example, an operator needs to vacate all volumes from a storage backend that is between the conversation or upgraded. Some volumes on that backend have snapshots. Currently, those volumes cannot be moved without deleting the snapshots. This is not accessible for the users. With this feature, the operator could migrate such volumes. And the second one is the second example is load balancing and TIA. Over time, an administrator may want to redistribute volume across backends. If a volume has snapshots, the current block migration. So enabling snapshot inclusive migration lets the administrator move the volume to a new backend without losing the snapshots. So Here is the next is the proposed changes. When a volume migration is required, Cinder determines whether the source volume has snapshots. If snapshots exist, Cinder checks whether the destination backend processes the capability of supporting the volume migration. The Cinder migrates snapshot first. Cinder copies each snapshot in dependency orders as a volume to destination backends, then creates a new snapshot on the destination backend. After the snapshot migration, Cinder migrates the base volume using the existing vendor driver volume migration. And then after the snapshots and volume migration, Cinder updates volume and snapshot metadata to point to the destination backend host and to ensure snapshot to volume relations remain intact. Okay, so if there are any questions, we hope we hope this feature can be merged into Hibiscus.
So the tricky part here is figuring out how a snapshot gets moved from the source to the destination backend. Are we assuming that there's some backend storage feature that the backend does it? Cinder doesn't have a really clean way to do this. I mean,
well, I think the problem is that a lot of the modern arrays use copy on write technology. And so the snapshots are not detachable in that respect from the volume, and also what happens when you're trying to move from one vendor to another. It's just not going to work because the snapshots are completely different beasts. You know, if you were using like a Dell or a Pure or a NetApp and a Hitachi, the snapshots for each one of those is a completely different animal and is worked on in a different way. So you're never going to be able to move between different backends, different vendor backends.
It almost seems like we're bending the idea of a snapshot here, whereas the one on the secondary backend would no longer be an actual storage snapshot. It would be like a block of data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you couldn't then turn that into another snapshot and reassign it back to the volume after it had been migrated over. There's no way of reassigning those things on any backend that I'm aware of.
Yeah, this is the same thing as saying we'll lose the copy on write sparse nature of these snapshots and the benefit, like the space benefit that
it's not just the copy on write sparseness you lose. How do you then reassign a volume? So basically you're taking a snapshot, taking it to another backend, but in the process of doing that, you have to convert it into a full volume. Yeah. How do you then convert that volume back into a snapshot of Cinder Volume 1 after that's migrated at the final point? There's no way to reintegrate a volume into another volume with a delta.
Yeah, certainly I can't think of one. I don't know. Do we have any vendors that support anything like this, or is this theoretical?
What if you supported, I mean, I think some vendors, this is Ishrak from Infinidat, which is now Lenovo. We can do volume migrations, at least from our array standpoint, with snapshots combined, like move the entire family over, not individually, because like somebody else said, they are intrinsically tied together. You cannot separate them because of the copy and write nature.
So if we have a handful of backends that can actually do that, then this is kind of interesting, but I have no idea if other backends exist that even have that feature.
So one thing, going back to the data center upgrade use case. So you have the storage backend and you have the Cinder host, right? When you migrate the volume, you are usually migrating both. You migrate the volume from the storage backend and from that host. You're moving away from those in the data center upgrade. You could kind of split that part and create a new volume host with the same configuration and not migrate the data, right? In that way, you would be able to migrate the host without migrating the data. And there could be a way to do the same with the data, like migrating the data from the storage, being like mirroring or copying, depending on the storage, obviously, and using the same volume backend. So the way that Cinder would see would not change. It would see the same volume backend with the same name, the same host, same pools. The only thing the data could be in a different host or in a different the host that would be like migrated. So I think there could be like another ways to do this, at least for this use case.
Yeah, but sometimes the user may not know if the administrator would like to for the second use case, if the administrator want to redistribute volume across backend, for example, moving order, let's access the volume to a different storage layer.
Do you have a vendor that supports this moving of both data, the volume data and the snapshot?
Sorry, may I beg your pardon?
My question is, one of the concerns is that when you move a volume, most of the vendors doesn't support decoupling the volume from the snapshot. So you would have to copy all the snapshot data and decouple them from the volumes. And my question is, if you are testing this in one storage in a storage provider that supports this migration, that is migrate the volume alongside the snapshots, so you don't lose this snapshot copy right?
Yes, yeah.
What is the backend that you have tested this, or what is this like a real thing, as a real use case, or what is the architecture that they're using? What is the volume?
We didn't do the test now. It's just to be implement. So we want to do this this feature independent of vendor's driver. So we would like to test them.
That's never going to work. Every vendor implements snapshots in a different way, and the two will never meet. So the only way you would potentially ever be able to do this is if you were moving the volume from one backend to another backend from the same vendor. And then that would probably require that vendor to have invoked some sort of replication capability, because the replication capability is what's going to move the snapshot points between the two arrays.
Yeah, like ZFS, I think you can do send and receives for volumes as well as snapshots, and you can move that and preserve everything that you're hoping to, but you can't cross the ZFS line. It has to stay inside that boundary.
So I think the same vendor to same vendor use case is probably useful enough for this to be interesting, but is there more than one vendor that actually can do it?
Well, Everpure can do it, but we have to invoke our replication capabilities. You have to effectively replicate the volumes synchronously or near synchronously between the two back ends. That's the only way you're going to do it. And I suspect, Ishrak, tell me whether I'm wrong, I think Infinidat do the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. It requires a replication capability to exist to start with, the replication capability to have been invoked and set up, And that is effectively what replication is today, and maybe what we're talking about in Cinder replication v3 tomorrow.
Well, to do this as a Cinder feature, this would be some kind of new driver API for, migration with snapshots of a volume.
Yeah, but it would require that the volume was already of a volume type that had replication configured.
Well, that's a backend specific thing. I'm talking about designing the Cinder feature. So we would need a new driver API, but to get into designing a new driver API, I think we would need to be sure that there's enough backends that actually can do this for it to be a worthwhile exercise. And I don't know what that number is. It's probably not 2, though.
I guess my question is, so Simon, with the so can you set up the replication purely backend to backend without telling Cinder?
You could, but it wouldn't work very well.
Yeah.
Certainly in the way, I don't know how the Infinidat does it, but with us, the volume name construct changes because it has to go into this entity which is replicated. There's a replication entity, and the volume has to go into that. And in going into that, it changes the name of the volume because it puts a prefix on it. Okay, which would then obviously disconnect it from the Cinder database. So it has to have been created as a replicated type in the first place.
Right.
So you have to plan way ahead to make this happen and have
have to plan way
volume types and then fail over. And then,
at which point you are already using the replication functionality to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So this is effectively redundant.
Well, I'm pretty sure that if we were going to do this as a Cinder feature, it would not be part of Cinder replication, right?
Well, I mean, this is what we're going to talk about in replication v3 tomorrow, isn't it? What are the use cases? And this could absolutely be a very, very valid use case. It's about retyping. It's whether you can do a retype of a volume to a replicated type as an underlying construct of this. So I could take one of these volumes on this back end that has got a whole bunch of snapshots. I could retype it from a non-replicated to a synchronously replicated. Yeah. That would then move all the snapshots and the volume over to the remote site. I could then, in like a DR mode, say, take that volume that's replicated on the remote site and convert it into a non-replicated on the remote site. So this is where we're getting into DR sort of space. And yes, this very much applies as a pseudo DR. But again, that's what we're going to be. That's part of the conversation track for V3, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, but just to come back to migration, Simon, at least in your case, if you have to enable replication in order to support plus snapshot migration, you don't really need migration after that because you've already replicated everything anyway, right?
Well, I mean, you can have non-replicated volumes, and you can just then convert them into a replicated volume. But yes, you still have to have that replication capability. That link has to have been created between the backends, which is why it's never going to work between heterogeneous backends.
But this also assumes that we've taken replication and turned it into an end user facing system instead of an admin.
And again, this is where we're talking V3 tomorrow. What parts do we expose to the user?
I think this feature is a lot more interesting as a migration thing that's not tied all into replication. But
well, for most vendors who are going to support the ability to move a snapshot from one backend to another, it's going to inherently require replication of some description. Ishrak, that's the same, isn't it, in Infinidat?
Right. So when we talk about migration, there's really 3 things we're talking about, right? There's migration within the same storage array, possibly to a different pool, for example. There is migration between 2 arrays of the same vendor. and there's migration between two different vendors. Each of these three has a different backend mechanism, right? The last two are very much more complicated. I think this is so. I guess my question is back to the person that started the conversation. Is this migration considering all three of those?
Yeah, we would like to the migration between different backends should be supported. I mean the different vendors.
Yeah.
Okay.
That fundamentally can't happen because of the way that snapshots are created on every individual vendor. They do them in a different way. And so therefore you can't just take the snapshot over. You would have to convert it into a volume. And then that volume would have to be, you'd have to do like a CBT diff between the source volume and the new volume you've created, and try and convert that into a local snap. I don't think there's any way of doing that physically. I mean, from a physics perspective, I just don't think it's possible.
So in this picture, on the destination backend, where it shows snapshot 1, 2, and 3, those are really volumes A1, A2, and A3.
Well, this is the use case that's proposed. This is not an implementation in this picture.
Right. But eventually, those snapshots will not really be snapshots in that storage backend. They would just be standalone volumes.
Yeah.
But then how do you diff those volumes to make them into effectively a snapshot and convert that diff into a real snapshot for the Cinder volume?
I don't know that you would have to. You would just Cinder would just have to know that there is a concept of an actual snapshot and is the concept of a volume snapshot that's been migrated. And in order to like take one of those volume snapshots, you could even just switch the volume itself. I mean, I'm not saying that that's a good idea. Just I could see that working. Waste a lot of space and stuff.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, yes, you could do that. You would have to be very clearly ring fence any of those volumes that you've created as snapshot volumes, so they can't be touched other than as a snapshot. So we would need to have a different flag on snapshots to say whether this is a copy on write type snapshot or a true volume, which is a snapped copy, a point in time copy volume. So they're two different things, and would have to be dealt with in different ways by backends if you wanted to do a snapshot restore.
Agreed.
But I guess,
will.
I mean, how will Cinder tell them apart other than, because when it reads the contents of the snapshot, you get the entire contents of the volume as of that point in time. How do you know? Like if you write that snapshot over to another backend as a volume, how do you tell that backend that this is an incoming snapshot?
Exactly. That's where you need to ring fence it in some shape, form, or fashion on that remote array. But also, I think, how does this work with snapshots that are created in trees? Because that's even more complicated at that point.
A snap of a snap of a snap.
Yeah. Couldn't just be represented in the Cinder side, and the storage would be like agnostic of those snapshot volumes for the storage. On the storage point of view, would be just volumes, but Cinder would understand using metadata or specific volumes.
That's what I'm saying. You'd need to flag them some way, whether it's in the metadata or in an additional field, additional column that says this is a copy on write volume or this is a point in time volume copy.
Yeah, and I think that for the snapshot operations, it shouldn't be that much different, like copying, or I mean, it would be different, but not different from the operations that we already support in Cinder.
All it would be
reading a volume from
the restore would have to be different.
Say that again?
Yep.
The restore would have to be different. It's the restore that's fundamentally different at that point.
My idea is that in the source backend, the snapshot will be converted to the volume, then use for example, use dd command to copy the volume to the destination backend. Then after the of course we can use some copy like to save times. And after the first snapshot, as the volume was copied to the destination backend, then at the destination backend we create as snapshot 1. Then we will do the snapshot 2, also convert it to a volume, and then copy it to the destination backend, then create snapshot 2 like this. So
yeah, there's one important point that that is, if the destination backend supports block deduplication, then the use case becomes even more interesting, because even though you have like multiple copies of volumes treated as snapshots, under the hoods you will not waste that much space, right?
Yeah, that is true. Data reduction, ways to do data reduction, absolutely wouldn't really care about this from a capacity perspective. What are the impacts on quotas? That's the other question that would need to be. If you're converting these things into volumes, then it's going to affect your user quota as well. Or do we look at what we did with Cinder client's image cache and have a separate tenant that just looks after it and has its own quota for these things?
Yeah, I think that should be hidden from the user, and it should just consume from the snapshot quota.
I think this is a brilliant idea, and I absolutely agree with the use case. I think at the moment, I'm not sure that any vendors can easily do this. There's probably ways to do it, but each vendor would be completely different way of doing it, and it would be extremely complex.
How about doing that in a generic way by just copying the volumes and using like the Cinder Manager API to move things around?
You could do that, but the question then is it so slow that nobody likes it?
Yeah. So the first thing, I mean, to do it, what you'd have to do is you have to take snapshot 1, you take that snapshot and you convert it into a full volume. You then copy that volume using regular volume migration to the destination backend, and you tag it as a point-in copy snapshot for a volume that has not yet been created. Because that volume is only created at the very last step, where the Cinder volume 1, the fully orange one, is actually ended up migrated over, and then you can assign those snapshots to that volume, but as a point in time full volume copy. And therefore, if you do a restore from the snapshot on the destination backend at that point, what you have to do is you have to look at the flag on the snapshot to see if it is a full point in time, full volume, or a snapshot that's been taken locally on that destination backend subsequently, and that's a copy on write maybe, and then decide how to restore from it, whether it's just a regular snapshot restore or whether it's a volume copy overwrite from a point in time volume copy. It becomes very complicated.
Yeah. If the storage support is just a pointer change, right, to restore the snapshot. Otherwise, you would have to copy all the data on top of the volume.
Yeah, and the complication comes when you've brought all these snapshots over. Then you start creating more snapshots on that volume once it's over on the destination end and the destination array. You've got two different types of snapshots, and you have to work out which one's which and how you restore from each.
Yeah.
Well, you could do this in a generic way by just using regular snapshots. It would just have very poor performance.
How would you do it with a regular snapshot? Because you take snapshot 1, how are you going to get snapshot 1 over the destination backend? You've got to convert it into a full volume before you can move it over.
Yeah, and we can do that. Temporary clone, create a snapshot, write the whole volume into that snapshot on the destination. and then keep creating more snapshots on the destination.
How do you then assign those snapshots back to Cinder Volume 1 once it comes over? Because from a vendor's perspective,
they're snapshots on the volume.
They're not snapshots, though.
But in the proposal I'm making, they are. You just make a volume and you make snapshots and you shuffle the data over and over and over. It would stink performance-wise.
I'm not even sure, because you're going to end up having to do copy overwrites on the source volume. I think copy overwrites will potentially, on some vendors, and I don't know which ones, it might wipe out the existing snapshots.
I guess one way, I'm just thinking out loud, one way it could be done is if the vendor also supports like taking a snap of a volume and making it writable and then writing to that snapshot.
Well, that's a full volume clone copy of the snapshot. That's a regular thing that we do anyway.
Right, but that will maintain the linkage as that is a snapshot. And if the future, if the volume is then subsequently updated and that snapshot can then be refreshed, it'll wipe out the previous contents, but the original link remains. It's kind of an odd way to do it.
I don't think it'd do that. In the process of converting a snapshot to a volume, you break that updating link because you have to, because you can't have a link between a snapshot and a volume that's been created from that snapshot, because let's say you were doing database work. You don't want that, you take that snapshot and you clone it into a full volume for people and developers to work on. If that snapshot gets updated for whatever reason, you do not want those changes to go into the developer's full clone database. That wouldn't work. You have to have they have to disconnect each other.
Yeah, but overall though, the idea of having a generic mechanism for migrating between vendors and is certainly a good plan. We got to figure out a way to do it.
I agree that it's a great idea, and I absolutely think that we should look at it more, but I'm really not sure how this is going to work for any vendor, to be honest, without additional constructs being applied, and genericizing it will be really difficult, I think.
Of course, not all of the vendors, not all of the vendors can be maybe supported. So Cinder before the migrate, Cinder will check whether the destination backend process the capability to supporting the volume migration. That is necessary. So.
Right, but I think in number 2, the question is what kind of volume migration?
Yeah. Is that you're right? Is that destination backend one of your 3 different storage pool on the same backend? Unlikely in this particular use case, because that's not what we're trying to achieve. Same vendor or different vendor. Those are the 2 critical ones at this point.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, like, we are discussing like the cross vendor thing, which is like a hard and complicated case. I mean, just for an MVP, if we start implementing this for a particular vendor, and as Ishrak said, like we have multiple cases, we take the most basic case, which is like migration within the same storage array. Like, how are we going to, I mean, this for the author, like which vendor first will be choosing for the implementation? And is it currently possible with that vendor to do same host, same array migration with snapshots?
I mean, we could do it in Everpure, but again, we'd have to have the replication capability enabled between the arrays. Not necessarily replication types. I think we could probably do it without doing a volume type that had replication in it.
I think Rajat was asking about
we could potentially do that.
I think Rajat was asking about the basic case, the migration within the same array. right, Rajat? Or
Yeah, within the
Well,
same array.
that's not a use case. That's not part of the use case. The use case is we need to do something with the back end maintenance, upgrade, downtime, something. So all the volumes have to come off it. It's not like moving it to a different pool within the same back end. That's not what this is all about. That I think that particular, number one that you talked about, Ishraq, is not anything that would assign in this use cases.
you think it's not a valid use case at all, or?
No, I think it's a very valid use case, but I just don't think it's a valid use case moving between pools in the same back end. I don't think it applies.
I mean, if we talk about load balancing, I think it seems like a valid case, but
Load balancing and tiering maybe, but isn't that what the storage assisted volume migration feature already is, that is implemented by NetApp and Hitachi and people like that, where they can move volumes between different pools?
Right. Does that storage assisted migration include snapshots?
no.
I don't know. You'd have to ask the individual vendors.
Right now, Cinder
Does
stops
not.
like any volume migration with snapshots. So that's what I was saying. Like right now, we support volume migration within different pools for load balancing, but we don't support volume migration with pools. Sorry, with snapshots.
So an MVP for this could be the vendors who have got storage assisted volume migration in the same back end, i.e. just between two different pools on the same back end. Can they, in their technology, support taking those snapshots in that tiering move effectively? And if so, is it just a matter of turning a flag on that says, yes, we can do this? That would be a really simple way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
if we can start with that. And I wanted to know like which vendor exactly are we thinking of implementing this first? So right now, all of this is theory, but I think for the implementation, we need to choose one specific vendor to start implementing this. So which one are we going for?
Well, I think there's only a few vendors that actually support storage assisted volume migration at the moment. So NetApp is one, I believe. Hitachi is one. I think
Yeah,
there's
we do as well. Infinidat does as well.
Yeah, Infinidat does as well.
But I think
some arrays don't have tiers. Like Everpure, we don't have tiers. We only have one tier. So that construct doesn't support anything we do. So that's why we don't support it.
I think I think one important thing for the cloud vendor is that should not be blocked by the vendor's lock. So they should can change the backend, change the vendors anytime if they want to change. So this is also important to avoid the vendor locks.
Yeah, if the main use case is across vendors like it, then yeah, then I don't think there will be an MVP, which I was proposing. So yeah.
Well, there will be an MVP. The M stands for maximum.
I'm not sure how you'd validate it anyway, because there are not many vendors who have other vendors' backends in their labs to be able to test something like this.
Yeah, we will. My idea is to test this feature first on LVM driver, so to avoid the vendor lock and independence of any vendor's driver.
Well, we could always test with an open source backend or something like that, but it won't be it won't be like a pure to Infinidat test because we don't have any pure systems.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't have Infinidat systems. So this is the problem, that vendors don't have other vendors' kit in their labs usually, not for this sort of stuff anyway. And yes, you could use software-defined storage, but software-defined storage and external array-based solutions are fundamentally different anyway. So Ceph does things in a completely different way to any physical storage backend array. So you couldn't go like a Ceph backend to a Ceph backend. That's the same. Or you could go from maybe a Ceph to a Linbit or something like that. But that's not just because it works between those two doesn't mean it's going to work on a backend that's an external array as opposed to some software defined stuff.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, like, how do we start the implementation here? Because it at least needs 2 vendors to make sure, like, there is no vendor lock-in with that feature.
Yeah, this is where we need collaboration between vendors.
Yes.
And we all know how that works out.
Are the NetApp folks here? I guess not. We use NetApp as our backend in all of our deployments. For what it's worth.
For the time being.
Yeah. I'm trying to get Ceph too.
So
there are a lot of vendors. There are a lot of clouds that use different vendor backends. That's absolutely true. People are going down the, we don't want to be stuck with a single vendor. We're going down a 2-vendor strategy. So it's very much a valid use case. I completely agree with that. I just don't know how feasible it is, to be honest, because of the fundamental physical differences between backends, the fact that different vendors basically don't talk to each other. So we wouldn't be able to collaborate to make sure everything worked correctly. Yes, okay, we could do a vendor to an open source migration with snapshots, but is that a viable thing? I don't know.
I mean, it could be a viable thing just to push this technology, the idea forward. Right?
Yeah, I mean, migrate from Ceph to a different vendor backend would be a thing,
or the other way around. Yeah. I think since we kind of agree that the idea is good and the need is there, right? I think we should try to do what we can. So what would be the next step here? I guess I'm not familiar with this whole process.
The next step would be, so we've got a blueprint, but it is theoretical, and so as this discussion has uncovered, like we need more concrete. There are some concrete questions, like how can you essentially import and export snapshots from a vendor specific, like a specific vendor to another one? Like how would that work? Can any of them do this? And what is the nature of it? Those sorts of questions would need to be addressed in the spec. And ideally, we would want to pick an initial candidate for like a proof of concept. These sorts of things need to be nailed down and documented and proposed as essentially a roadmap. Those would be, at least in the way I'm thinking about it, that would be those immediate next steps.
For what it's worth, when I was working at HP on the 3-par driver, I believe it had the ability to do this from one array to another, but I don't know if anybody's maintaining any of that anymore.
Yeah, and again, that's the same backend to same backend though.
That's my use case because we have to decommission old arrays quite often.
Yeah, I think even within the same vendor, it would be potentially appealing, like, but we need to identify one that can do this, and as a first step, and then we need the implementation details, the API changes, the calls, like all of that taken out of just the theoretical space and applied to something more concrete, so we can actually have a discussion about what changes would be coming in Cinder, what would be the nature of them, how that interacts with the rest of the existing implementation, those sorts of things.
Right. And if we talk about migration within the same vendor, we're basically talking about replication, right? Because it's not distinguishable from replication. It's replication for migration purposes, not for disaster recovery purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for decommissioning for us. We have to decommission our old arrays, and we've got to move everything from one array to another. And we're currently not interested right now to move all of our volumes from one vendor to another in that decommissioning process. But theoretically, in the near future, we might.
Right. And the decommissioning could be in such a way that you're breaking it up or moving it and consolidating. It could be several arrays moving to one, or one array moving to several smaller ones. It could be anything, right?
It could be anything, correct. And
what I'm saying is the vendor is the one who can do it the most efficiently, right?
yes.
Otherwise, the client will simply do a read and a write, which may not be very efficient.
All right. Yeah. We're kind of hacking around this right now because we're in the process of doing a lot of volume movements from one volume type to another without changing the volume type, and so we're kind of breaking a lot of things. But we're getting away with this by all of our snapshots being clones, which is not terribly efficient, but we're kind of getting away with it in that respect. And we have the ability to also create snapshots on different pools because they are clones, which most people don't do as well.
And that's a very proprietary NetApp way of doing things.
This is a NetApp.
Okay.
This is VMware.
But yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Behind the scenes, NetApp is behind the vCenter and all that, but we're getting the hell off of VMware.
Good man.
Mm. Yeah, I can poke some of the NetApp guys to find out if they can. I'm sure that they could do array to array migrations with volumes and snapshots if we started actually using real snapshots. I think.
Well, this is it. It's if you convert the snapshot into a clone, then it can be done.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But it's time consuming, it's space consuming, it's quota consuming, and it's just slow at the end of the day. And maybe that's acceptable when you're doing something like a full upgrade. You're planning it for months in advance, and you can do it slowly. But I think there is a very valid use case for an emergency situation where you want to move some volumes really quickly. And if they've got snapshots and you need to start messing around converting them, I personally think it would be faster to do it with something like an Ansible playbook. But there you go, rather than writing a whole API within OpenStack. Yeah, we can do that in parallel, but I think an Ansible playbook could probably do it a heck of a lot faster and make it viable within a very short time frame, without having to go through the whole process of building in a new feature within Cinder. Yes, do that in parallel so we can migrate away from the Ansible stuff in the future. But I think Ansible is probably the easiest way to do this today.
Yeah.
And now I might have to go write an Ansible playbook to do that.
I can see if I can get in touch with our NetApp contact to find out if.
And then write a blog post on it.
Yeah.
So we've got maybe a minute or two left to stay on schedule. If I moved things around to try to accommodate the discussion. But if we want to go much further on this topic, we should probably add a second session tomorrow or somewhere where we have some buffer. So I guess to the proposing author of this, does this provide some clarity? Do you have a sense of what next steps and what next questions would be?
Yeah, currently the details of the implementation is under investigation. So I'm trying to writing a draft spec. So I will submit to the I will submit very recently. So hope about the implementation. Hope to get some comments. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess this overlaps quite a bit with some of the replication discussions we'll be having on tomorrow. So you may want to catch that session as well. It's not obviously exactly the same, but there's some implementation details that will probably be helpful to be a part of if you're curious about that.
Yeah.
Okay, we can move to the next topic then. I think this is Yatsna.
Hey, hi John. Hi everyone.
Hello. The floor is yours.
Yeah, we had one proposal and for new driver, HP Electra MP new driver, where we got a few feedbacks from co-reviewers in the last weekly meeting, that they wanted to understand the specific role of the flow kit. Like, this is the backend library which we are using. So what is the role of this flow kit with this new Cinder driver? So I think I'll just share my screen just to refer this. Just share it. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned, just to give context, like what was the intention behind this update, is we got the feedback, and according to that, we have updated like what is the basic role of this flow kit and what operations we are doing inside this flow kit, just to give an idea, like, because in this new Electra MP driver, we have moved a couple of pre-processing operations which we were doing in old driver. We don't want those pre-processings to be continued at the upstream side, and we move those logics to this flow kit part. So I just want to go through what specifically this flow kit is doing. So basically it is setting up this HP 3-par ops, and it is retrieving the driver options using this function get driver options. And in specific, if we want to go that this flow kit is basically interacting with our backend. So it has few functions which receives input parameters from driver. It is also reading few configurations from CinderConf, the relevant configuration for that operation, and it processes that input, because there are a couple of validations which we do based on the configurations provided in CinderConf. So those validations we have moved here. We construct the payload which is required by the backend API, and we have a API call to our backend where we process this request from backend, and we return back the payload which is expected by the Cinder driver using this flow kit. So basically, the main intention of moving few logic from upstream driver code to this flow kit is we wanted a bit control on the validation part and pre-processing part, which we mostly use to make a clean payload for our WSAPI backend processing. So that is the reason I think you might see that I think reviewers have concern that the couple of part is moved out from this driver code, and we moved it to flow kit. So basically the reason we've mentioned here, I would request co-reviewers to take a look at this and if there are any queries, we can answer here. I think this is, I'll just want to thank everyone to give this platform for us to explain this and make our things easy to make this driver get into this release. So yeah, this is really helpful. This call is really helpful.
Yeah, I guess.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the reason why you have to discuss this here. So I don't know. I guess I'm not clear myself about the boundaries between the flow kit and the driver. I mean, explained them, but I mean, the problem I ran into was when I was reviewing the driver, right? I saw that options were being pulled out and I couldn't figure out where they were being defined and registered. Okay. And so that seems to be the kind of thing that you'd expect the driver to do. I don't know what I'm saying, really, to be honest. It's like,
I think maybe you were looking for these first two options, like setting HP3 per ops, where we are doing that, and how we are retrieving these driver options. I think you like,
yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, right. And then you explained on the review that it's being done in the flow kit, and it's like, okay, but that's, I mean, in a sense, it's not opaque to me because the flow kit is open source, so I can go look at the flow kit code to see that that's happening. But in a sense, I don't want to.
The driver options need to be in the Cinder tree, really, and not internal library.
It's not opaque like from our text editor, but it is from like the theoretical model, like the community sense. Like I think maybe that's what Brian is getting at. Is
well, it's also a requirements management thing. Like it opens up all kind of tricky things about what happens when the library is updated for older branches, because we don't currently cap things. I mean, if we wanted to have,
I got your point. I would like to answer this query that, see, this driver code, which we are saying Altera MP.py, and this flow kit, they both sits on the same dev stack setup environment, and they are together installed. Like even if we talk about Red Hat environment, they're also in the same image. Both things goes together. So if there is an update in the library and flow kit might get impacted because of that, but still we will have the latest code, like which is running on that environment. So I think it might not impact much.
It's not just about that, though. I mean, things like config options are a big thing that we want to review as part of Cinder drivers. Having them in an external library where they can change basically makes it where we can't do that. Unless we were going to get into some kind of game of putting a cap and reviewing the external library and bumping the version every time it changes or something, but nobody wants to do that. I don't see any upside to putting configuration in an external library instead of in the driver in the tree.
Okay, maybe for accessibility we moved it to FlowKit, but we can figure out if there's a feasibility of moving this back to driver so that it's visible to all the reviewers, and yeah, we can think about these two options moving to Altera MP driver. Like we will have to get back on the feasibility side for that. Yeah, but we can update on this page if this is a viable option, and we can do that as a part of addressing the feedback.
Yeah, I guess what I don't know, this might be impossible. What I'm hoping to figure out is, so the options are an easy case, and I sort of stopped reviewing at that point. But it's like seeing the options defined in the flow kit made me wonder what other stuff is there that really should be in the driver. And I wasn't able to come up with, like, so the way you explain it here, I mean, right? Stuff specifically to communicate between the driver and the back end seems to make sense would be in the FlowKit library. But then I'm wondering, why wouldn't a vendor just make a driver that's just a bunch of stubs? And then
that's something I considered actually doing, by the way.
Yeah, and I don't. So, yeah, I guess I don't even know what I'm trying to say, except that it seems like that would be an extreme case that we wouldn't want to allow. But I'm not sure where we make the distinction to make it easy for you as a developer to know what goes in FlowKit and what goes in the driver, and also for us to say what makes sense. And Walt, you've had experience doing this, so you should talk.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's
we
why.
Yeah, Walt, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to comment. So I did basically something exactly like this with the 3-par drivers. I initially created, and also the Sapphire SCSI driver for that matter as well. I created client libraries that knows how to do some of the magic in the back end, like talking to the actual API itself and what the API exposes. And then the client exposes like these logical capabilities to the driver. So that way there's a good logical separation between what the driver is responsible for and how much knowledge about the specific API of the storage backend shouldn't really live within the driver, because there's a clear separation. So if you want to take a look at that, look at the existing 3-par drivers and the 3-par client, because there's a clear separation there between the two.
Yeah, so we exactly followed the same design which we had earlier with old driver, like for 3-par and other platforms. So there was also the same design that the backend logic or the business logic was at the backend in 3-par client, and we used to process that, and the driver had a few processing logics. But in couple of releases, we figured out that some validation parts or some processing parts which is related to the payload which is going to this backend FlowKit is meant to be in FlowKit, because maybe the Cinder driver is not worried about those processing and those validations to be in the upstream code. So that is the reason we wanted a clear separation, and we wanted to make this driver lightweight with only relevant code which is relevant to Cinder processing or Cinder abstraction to be implemented in this driver file. And we wanted the business logic or the backend processing, because we have to do some pre-processing before sending the payload to the backend, and we have to do some post-processing which because we wanted to make a payload acceptable by the driver. So these post and pre-processing, earlier couple of things were in the old driver upstream code, which we have now moved to this FlowKit. So basically we don't want to overload the driver with this pre-processing and post-processing things and validations on the input parameters. So that is the reason I think we moved it. But regarding this driver options and like some of the things which reviewers want in the Cinder part, we can take care of that feedback.
It sounds like there is somewhat of a separation in this FlowKit. I haven't looked at it yet, so I apologize, but I would think that any options that are related to the driver doing its work should be specified in the driver, not in this FlowKit stuff. And some of it could be a pass-through, but it needs to be in there for documentation reasons, I think, because a lot of vendors, like I'm a vendor, an operator now, I look at the source code of the drivers to find out really what the details of the options for that driver are.
Sure.
So I looked at the FlowKit code a little while ago when I was looking at this, and as I recall, there's part of it is that there's a multi-thousand line Cinder driver basically sitting in the FlowKit. which strikes me as not the right way to go about this.
Okay, so like what is the way out of this now? Like if you guys have any suggestion, I will think through that.
Do you have a link to the FlowKit source?
Yeah, I can share.
Could you just put it in the Etherpad, because it's, I know
Sure.
it's.
And basically that FlowKit has all the documentation also. So you can go through documentation, what exactly we are doing with the FlowKit. But yeah, if you take a look and if you have some queries on specific code, we'll definitely try to address that.
Well, so is the goal here to be able to ship fixes and updates outside of the Cinder update review process, or like what's the
Yeah, a
motivation?
couple of times we get some DERs and CERs from customers requesting some specific support related to storage side, not Cinder side, and they want few things to be addressed quickly, because like they don't want to wait for the Cinder release process to completely release. So maybe that could be one of the reason that that those validations and all we wanted in the FlowKit. But yeah, I mean, if few things are yeah.
So you guys are going to maintain like branches for each OpenStack release on this thing, or?
Yeah, we will be keep updating that FlowKit version in this Cinder driver requirement text. And
well, that's different from what I was asking, though. I mean, how are you going to ship fixes on stable branches?
See, as a part of this new driver, we are only supporting Altera MP driver. So all whatever will be delivered, a new feature or bug fixes will go as a part of this. But see, we have to like we have some tight coupling with storage releases also. Like in some places we have to adhere to that storage release. So for that reason, we wanted this FlowKit to spin up a little, in some cases, little early, apart from the Cinder release. So yeah, means but if we want that, okay, we have to tie up with Cinder release also. We can release a special branch of this with Cinder, like corresponding to Cinder release, like say HH release, we want a FlowKit release. So that we can do. That is like not a problem. We can have release tags tied up with Cinder releases for this FlowKit release. Yeah, so Eric, Brian, any other thing you want to discuss?
Yeah, I was just taking a quick look at the driver, and it looks like most of it is just stubs to call the common class, which is what I believe the 3-part driver has been refactored to do now. So Most of the work is done by the common class using the client that you pass in, and the client is this FlowKit library, right?
Yeah, so we have divided this FlowKit into a folder structure where we have a Cinder, you can say adapter, which is getting inputs from the Cinder configuration file and processing that. And we have workflows defined for each operation, like if we have a volume operation, related operation like create volume or delete volume or modify volume. So those workflows are divided under workflows folder. So
I see. I was mistaken in my previous statement. I thought you're using the 3-part common, but it looks like most of the driver doesn't even exist in the driver. All of the real functions live in this FlowKit stuff. So yeah, all of the function calls that are the entry points into the driver are just basically stubs to call this FlowKit. So the whole driver really is in this FlowKit library itself, not in Cinder.
Yeah, so
Anyway, I think this is the first driver that's trying to do this. I'm not sure it's.
Yeah, I don't know if this was mentioned before, but I think like the problem that's been trying to solve here with this driver is the problem that many drivers have faced, many vendor drivers have faced, which is to get features to be reviewed and accepted to the Cinder code. Back when I was a Cinder developer, a long time, 5 years ago, it was already hard, and I think that the problem has even increased a bit. So vendors might be trying to figure out ways to
yeah, Elon, I think we lost you.
Yeah, like another way of stating the question would be if our review process were more responsive, would that I'm assuming that would decrease the motivation for this significantly. I'm wondering, are we solving the wrong problem?
Well, it sounds like what they're really trying to accomplish here is that if there are bugs with their customers, that they can get fixes to their customers out of band of the Cinder releases, which anybody can do, but
we rely on them. It wouldn't rely on community reviews and timeline. It would just be AP timing, right? If they are willing to maintain it, if they have the resources, they don't need to rely on anyone. They can have one version of the driver compatible to each of the supported OpenStack releases they want to support, and they can ship that like overnight.
Yeah, I mean, it gives the vendor control, but it takes it away from our ability to review and to version and to wait.
I mean, it's effectively having an out of tree driver, but not having it out of tree.
Exactly.
It's like you keep it in the tree, but you get rid of all the benefits of having it in the tree.
Yeah.
And in the past, we have told vendors not to do that. You can have your own open source driver that if your clients need it, they can install it outside of Cinder, and it doesn't live in Cinder, so that we're not responsible for making sure that it continues to work in whatever shape or form it is with all the stubbed client, which really isn't a client in this case, it's the actual driver.
Well, and one of the theories of this whole Cinder effort is that having the drivers in the tree gets more eyes on them, and we review stuff, and we can handle change management, and over time we ship stuff that works better.
Yeah, like our support matrix and like what third party I guess like our notion of supported drivers would change then. Like if it's in tree but it's not really in tree.
Okay,
like our ability to do this would be compromised as well, because it would be like, well, I don't know. Like, this all just gets handed off to FlowKit. So I don't
Okay,
know.
I'm kind of getting what everyone's feedback here. Like basically, few stuff which is related to Cinder, we want it in the driver specifically, and only backend processing should be separated from the Cinder code. Yeah, I'm getting feel that okay, maybe we might not get benefits of the reviewers point of view and in few feature developments, further feature developments. So yeah, I'm trying to understand that. So basically then what is the way out? Like, will it be possible that if we commit this flow kit also as a part of Cinder, will that help? Like this can be one option, or maybe we can move the code back to Cinder, which is Cinder related, which was there in old driver.
That is an interesting.
Maybe we can
idea.
optimize that a little bit and avoid.
Yeah, I think that would definitely solve the problem, at least on this architectural way that we see Cinder drivers. And I don't see any reason why the code that is in the flow kit shouldn't live in Cinder. I mean, other than the review comments that people will do on that. Yeah, but and I think that writing something that is closer to what the Cinder standards are today is much cheaper and easier with all the AI tools and things. I don't know what HP uses, but it shouldn't be hard to get these and kind of refactor it in a way that could be easier for developers to review and could like be in line with most of Cinder standards. But we still would have to discuss the driver review and driver feature throughput on overall for Cinder, which I think is something that we need to work on, because I know the pain of having customers on one side asking things and we the other side trying to get reviews from reviewers that not always, most of the time, don't have the bandwidth to work and approve the things. So yeah, this is two things we should work on.
Okay, so then maybe what we can do is explain what chunk of, maybe more specific on what processing we are doing as a part of this flow kit. Explain that and move few Cinder related code back to the Cinder driver, or else there is another path that we commit this flow kit as well as a part of this driver. So yeah, so then
I'm more for the second option, just to have everything into Cinder, even the libraries, the API access and anything. There's no reason why it should live outside.
So I'll just internally talk to our architect, our reviewers, internal reviewers, and maybe we get back on the same page which we updated for this flow kit role, and we'll check the feasibility of both the options, and maybe we'll update here. So this point of reference is okay if we update here for all reviewers.
It sounds good to me.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try to get back on this.
One other data point I want to add. So I mean,
yeah, Rajit.
Yeah, it was being discussed like a few minutes ago about having more control over the external library. But if we talk about real world deployments, then it's not that easy. I mean, surely you could release the flow kit like independently of Cinder, but again, you will have to create a custom container where you have the new release of the flow kit integrated into it and ship it to the customer deployment. So again, it adds this overhead. I mean,
Release
again,
overhead. Yeah, I understand. Release overhead is it?
yeah. So in the real world customer deployment, you would again have to go through certain custom procedures to build a custom container with the new version of this library. And again, it's like, I mean, I think including it with Cinder will make it more straightforward, and you won't have to do this. You won't have to even document or like manage this custom procedure along with that. I just wanted to mention it like for in
So with
consideration.
time, interest of time, if like say for this first release of this Altera MP driver, maybe we'll see which option is quicker for us, and because a lot of customers are waiting for this driver, so we'll see which is the most feasible option looking at the time of interest, and maybe we'll come up with some update on this same page that what are we preferring, and maybe next release we can put the code, little bit of code which is concerned here that should be part of driver back to this, and like we can come back to the older design that where the old driver was having few code of point in Cinder only, which is specific to Cinder for reviewers. Yeah, we'll come back on this. Thanks everyone for sharing your opinions. It helps us to make this better.
Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Maybe in a week we'll update this same meeting point. This PTG page I'll update.
Okay, and there's also the regular weekly Cinder meeting. You can
Yeah. In that also we can update you. Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot.
All right, and thank you for taking those concerns seriously.
We still have any time to discuss something similar? Somewhat. We're in the top of the hour, yeah. Right.
I was hoping for a break, but yeah.
Yeah, so I was just kind of thinking why we can't have something like Kubernetes have for connectors. I don't know how they call that, but Kubernetes basically allows you to have external code that adheres to a very very strict and controlled contract that allows you to plug network providers or storage plugin providers. And yeah, maybe if we had something like that in Cinder, I don't know.
One reason I think is that there's probably a defined API, so that contract is defined. Whereas this external, like this extra library, there is no enforceable contract. So it can be as thick or thin as it's wanted to be. And so like we're basically just handing over the ability. Like once we allow that, then you can just move the entire driver into a third-party library and then iterate as quickly as you want outside of the OpenStack development model, which I can understand the value in that. Absolutely.
Isn't it possible that to bake that in the model, what can be outside of the contract, what is not outside of the contract, and how the interface should behave?
Well,
shouldn't that be enough?
It doesn't have a contract. Like we just don't generally allow this because like it's open source, and so like the drivers are, to be open source means it's committed to the Cinder. Like to be a Cinder driver, you live in the Cinder tree.
There's different philosophies with trees, right? I mean, for one thing, since we're Python based, it's actually not as easy to enforce those boundaries as it is in some other infrastructures. But I mean, you can have external drivers with a defined interface to them what Cinder has done forever is the same thing as like the Linux kernel model, where you have your code in the tree and there's interfaces in the tree. And the upside of that is that when you want to make new interfaces or change them, the code is all there. And you can just do it and update things as needed and adjust stuff. The other big benefit that Cinder has gotten out of doing things this way is that I think a lot of vendor drivers have had problems caught in them by the Cinder community review process that would have been caught by users instead if they were developed as external drivers.
This is actually a very old discussion.
Yeah.
I proposed pulling out all of the drivers from Cinder proper years and years and years ago, and it always comes back to the same issue, which is one, quality of Cinder itself is directly related to the quality of the drivers and how they function. And so that's why we put all these third-party CI requirements in place, and et cetera, et cetera. But there's nothing today that will prevent any vendor from developing a driver and keeping their own GitHub tree with it and providing a pip install of it that installs on top of Cinder or next to Cinder and deploying it today. I mean, the contract with the volume manager and the driver is pretty well defined, and you can develop a driver outside of tree if you want to. But the trick is if you want to be a part of Cinder proper itself and be a part of the releases, this is the way you have to do it. You have to actually put your driver in tree and go through the process and create CI, et cetera, et cetera. So there's nothing today preventing anybody from writing a driver that's outside of tree.
So Tintry do that today, actually. Once they got removed out of the Cinder tree, they are still writing a Cinder driver and are still deploying it with customers today. It's just they're doing it on their own GitHub. The problem with that is supportability. You know, if they have a problem,
especially when Cinder the interfaces change, then they might be quick enough to realize that, but especially with the lead time of the Cinder release cycles. But
and they're not checking against things like LS Brick, which we're required to do now as part of the third-party stuff as well.
Yeah,
but I think that I understand the benefits, and I kind of agree with most of them. But something that changed from the first discussions is the entry barriers, right? Which is every day getting bigger. But yeah, I think that the option to have the driver completely out of tree was something that I was actually thinking if it was possible, since for this scenario, for the HPE scenario, since they are already kind of providing the driver like 85% out of tree, why not just provide the driver completely out of tree for their customers?
Well, the reason why I think they want to do this is that when the release notes and the documentation is generated for Cinder proper itself for the release, their driver's listed there. So when customers want to go looking for, hey, I just bought I'm looking at these arrays, is it supported by Cinder? They look at the Cinder documentation, and since the shim is in place in the driver itself, in Cinder itself, it's there in the documentation. If it's completely out of tree, it's much more difficult for them to find that.
That's actually a really good point. Well, I know many customers who specifically look at the support matrix for Cinder and the Red Hat version of it as well and go, you're not in it, we're not talking to you, or that feature isn't listed, so we're not going to use you for it even though you say it works. So I've seen that with many customers. They're very, very hot on support matrix, particularly in APJ. For some reason, APJ are more obsessed with support matrices than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, so I definitely think after looking at the driver in question here that some changes need to be made if they wanted to be included, from my perspective.
Yeah, that's helpful because I looked at the I actually looked at your 3-part driver and the way you have it structured, and it looked like they had taken your approach to like an extreme. Where it was like it had the same names, it has a common, it has a client, but man, the code was nowhere.
But that's why in my initial look at it really quickly while we're in this meeting, I thought I saw this all of the shims calling common, and that's when the 3-part driver got refactored after I left. They created a common class that did everything, but that common class lives in the Cinder tree. It just happened to be named the same. So I'm like, oh, they're just using that. But I looked a little closer, and almost none of the code for the driver is in the driver. It's just a straight up shim.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully we left things clear on next steps.
All right. Next on the agenda are backup container name templates. I do not know Undead Punk's actual name. Let me see.
I think it's Dimitri.
You guys want to take a quick break?
Take a 5-minute break, probably.
5 minutes. All right, cool. Let's do 5 minutes. I'll see if I can dig up Dimitri on IRC, and yeah, we'll just meet back here in 5.
So 16.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. See you in a minute.
we back yet?
I think everybody's reconvening.
Okay. Right. I'd just like to cover the CBT stuff before 1 o'clock my time, 1700 UTC. So I have something I need to go on, but I want to talk about the CBT stuff.
Ah, okay.
Is everyone back? Do we need to wait? Where are we at?
I'm not the best person to ask if everybody's back.
I'm hearing you fine.
Yeah, I'm getting these messages that they can't display all the video.
Strait of Hormuz controls the internet as well as oil.
Does anyone know anything about the CBT? Have you looked at the CBT based backup spec?
Yeah, I have. I put a whole bunch of comments in it today. This is why I wanted to raise it. Well, I wanted to be around when it was talked about.
Is Hong here?
Oh, here. Hi,
Okay.
I'm Hong. My name is.
We're gonna try to go through the backup naming templates, but I'm hoping we can squeeze both these topics in, just in the interest of not having to push to another day, because I know scheduling is hard for a lot of folks. So, yeah, just bear with us. We'll try to get through both of these topics before we wrap today.
What's the status of the container name templates? Is it got a spec? I thought the spec was approved.
So
I confusing it.
I found Dimitri on IRC. He's going to jump in here now, I think, and take over. Dimitri, take it away.
Yes. So eventually it has a spec. It was not approved or it wasn't merged, and it has also reference implementation. Though there was concern, I guess, Brian, you raised actually, which is kind of an advance that the spec in implementation actually does not. So actually, they allow operator to. Okay, let me rephrase it. Sorry, I'm really sorry. I need to put it in my. So in case operator changes a config and a template name, there is no safeguard or nothing that will allow the backup to be reachable. So it assumes that operator will also move actual data on the storage layer somewhere accessible and matching the new template name. And this was the biggest concern. And this was done this way. It was written this way because, first of all, we don't reply a user with actual container, because if user says, okay, I want to create a backup in container A, and then we template it, we store in database the new name, and then we reply to the user, okay, well, it's not container A, it's container your project ID A something else, pass on the local disk or something. And then also there is no connection on no feedback, because operation is asynchronous, and so after the request it's handled over to Cinder backup, and it decides basically. So It was kind of the simplest way to do this, and I'm not sure how to like improve it significantly. Let's put it this way. If it makes any sense. I can, let me give a second. I will add spec actually to.
So if I'm getting all of this correctly, right now we have a deployment-wide configuration parameter called container name, which we specify where the backups are going to be, in which container. Now we want it on a more granular basis, like the project ID. If we want to have each container for each tenant, and we want like the backups of that tenant to go into that container. Is that the idea?
Yes, I think pretty much. This is the idea. Because so it also kind of may play nicely together with prohibition for users. So this is another spec which was merged and actual implementation which was merged previous cycle to actually prohibit users to create a custom container names. But the idea is that this way you can actually separate data on storage layer. So for instance, you can in template, if you're using like local file system or something like that, you can create a folder for the domain and then projects inside a domain, and this way like structure it somehow or like move to different like disk or something like that. If it's Swift or S3, you can actually define different policies. So one thing we were thinking about internally that you can create an immutability policy, and then different users might define different policies they want or for their projects, for their users or something like that. So you could like template it and they will be respected. But we will create such buckets or such like containers for them in advance. If it makes any sense. But eventually we would like this all would require to be able to have a predictable naming, which will be non-default one, which depend on the user and their actual like data.
So you're proposing that we like do some sort of a subset of like variable expansion, like we do it in calls to like print statements and.
Yes, I guess something like that.
And all these containers so these containers will be created as part of the deployment, right? Like if I want any level of granularity, I mean, it could be a case where I'm doing like based on user ID or project ID, but somehow the container doesn't exist. So is there going to be like when the backup service starts, are there going to be checks like all the containers exist, or is it just assumed like it is created as part of the deployment and we should not worry about?
So it depends. So it depends on the other thing that was implemented previous cycle, and it's if users are allowed to create containers. So if like the setting is that tenant can create containers, then they will be created for user during like backup creation. So if container doesn't exist, it will be created. But at the same time, operator is able to restrict that, and it will be these containers will be provided as part of the deployment. So you can put a restriction on that if you want to. And in either part, I just added like both like reference implementation I had and basically the spec.
Do you have an implementation for that? I remember having reviewed something in those lines. Not sure if it was exactly this.
I'm sure you reviewed something, but probably it was for previous spec, to be honest. But I'm not sure.
Before the spec, me.
For spec specifically, yeah, probably. So yeah, but issue is that in case operator changes like template itself, then probably it's operator responsibility to move the data on the backend. And to merge the new template names, there is like nothing that will solve that in the code.
Mm-hmm.
We surely need a proper documentation around it, like all the pitfalls that deployments could, the end users or customers could fall into. But as long as all the deployment pieces are in, I think this should just work fine. I mean, I'm just worried about the case where the admins need to create these containers. I think if they're created on demand and a normal user has the privilege to do it, then that is fine. I mean, some backup drivers might be handling it that way, but for the, like, we have to pre-warm this containers, like we have to create a bunch of them before they could actually be used. We need to be very careful with the template. That's basically what I'm worried about, but I think overall it should just work fine.
Yeah, correct. So the pitfall about renaming, I added it to actually like to help of config option. So it is there is like a note that, yeah, it's operator responsibility to rename already existing containers. So if you change that, which I think could be kind of enough, because if you're like using some configuration option, you would likely read help for it. So it's kind of the most obvious place, at least for me. But I can create a completely separate documentation page. About usage of like in combination with with prohibit to create container names. I think it's fair. I can add that if it's not a problem at all, and it's fair note that probably it should be documented better. But yeah, sure.
And what would be the default for, like, what would be the default template? Like, where do we want to set the granularity as a default, or is it going to be no? Are there going to be no default?
Default will be current backup default container. So there is a configuration options, which is like default container. So we are using like as a template this default value, and that's it. And there is a set of like allowed variables, which include like backup ID, project ID, user ID, volume ID, or beauty zone, and the container name actually. And the container name is a required argument. So whenever you change the template, it must contain it must contain this variable.
And I do see a point in the spec. Sorry, I'm just reading as we go through the discussion. Like it says, like Cinder backup must validate supplied templates at startup and fail if the configuration is incorrect. So that is one thing I wanted to be there. So yeah. So just an upgrade case where we are moving away from this. So if a deployment has like the container name set in one version, and then they upgrade and they define a backup default container template, and suddenly I think this template also, so when I'm trying to get a backup, like restore a backup, then also this template comes into picture. So somehow, like all of their old backups might be inaccessible. So it's their responsibility to migrate them, like in an upgrade scenario, right?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, that also should be part of the release notes or documentation.
But so I guess that when you change backup, so if you're not changing the value of template, then whenever you change like backup default container, shouldn't really matter, I guess, on itself. But if you change the template during upgrade or something, then it's just the structure of the template, because in for backup in database, we store only like the default container name, basically, backup default container. This is what we store in database. And then we, during runtime, actually convert it to like a template when we try to access data or delete data or something like that. So with default value of template, even if you change, it will still be like stored in database as is. So it only affects if you like change non-default value, basically, when you need to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, in general upgrades, we tend to avoid changing the configurations and like applying new configurations. But I was just mentioning one case where it could happen. But yeah, surely it should be safe with the default value of container name as the backup default container.
Yeah.
So what exactly do we store in the backup record now?
So right now we store, we already store default container name, or backup default container, sorry. Backup default container is actually the variable that is getting stored in database. And this is a required part of the template. So whenever you like, there is a check in place which will ensure that backup default container is part of the new template. So any like conclusion on the topic or something we can go on with, or any like questions or suggestions, or
Rajat or anybody, are there any objections to this effort?
I don't have any.
No, I'm okay with it.
I think that's as close as you'll get to full steam ahead from this group.
I'll plus two.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I will just then rebase implementation because I think it contains most of the thing except probably documentation part, which I will look at during rebase. But other than that,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It helps operators in one way, and then it's going to be an enormous pain in the butt in other ways. But it's optional, so nobody's required to use it. I was just still concerned about changing the name of the container. But, as long as the operator is aware that if they change the template, they're going to have to change all the containers themselves on the back end. I guess that's fine.
I was just trying to think how we can do it other way around, but that would require so if we store a new path in the database, then we would need to somehow reverse engineer from the template or something, which would risk also exposing a thing. And especially it could be quite unpleasant if we are talking about not like a 3 or a Swift, but something like local storage, like NFS or Ganesh or something, where you could have like multiple drives or something like that, or some kind of interesting path in it.
Yeah, I think as long as we're upfront that it's you got to think about this before you actually start using it. We should be okay.
Well, we need to make sure that and the implications of it are spelled out in the spec, right?
Yeah.
I think it's actually written in a deploy impact.
Yeah, I think maybe I missed something earlier, but I'm still trying to figure out why changing this means that you need to rename existing containers. Like, why are we not persisting enough info with the backup record to not have to do that?
So pretty much the reason because we don't want to. So because user can provide a container name as argument to the backup, we want to return this exact name back to the user whenever he checks. Whenever he checks for like backup info. So when he do like OpenStack backup show, he returns the container name which he passed, despite it's been converted to something completely different through a template.
But we could still store it as part of the backup without exposing it to the user in the API, right?
Probably the other way to do this would be to introduce some new table in the database. And then have like kind of requested container name and actual like storage path or something like that, which in some cases would be the same, and do some migration for that. And then use one thing for actually internal knowledge of where the backup is, and other for like what to show the user. It's a question of I mean.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, yeah, I'd made that suggestion that we could have a display name and like actual, backend name in the database.
I can modify spec to include this
But I don't know. I mean, because then in that case, right, if you want to keep all the stuff in a single container, then that wouldn't happen. So the display name and the other name solves the problem of you can always find the backup reliably. But if the problem you're trying to address, which I think is what you're after, is the actual containers themselves in the back end, the way stuff's organized, you always want this dude's stuff to be in a particular container. And so if you change the template because you need to do it, for your overall deployment, I think you would want to do what you're saying, migrate in the back end and just change the name back there, because then at least the stuff is all in the same, back end container. Yeah. So I think this is one where we got to trust you as an operator, knowing what works, because
I mean, I could deal with also storing in database if that's a preferable way to do things, because it doesn't really cost me much to go and update database, but
but on the other hand, if you don't need to, I guess I'm still kind of in the air on this one. But I guess the main thing is we got to be clear about the way it gets used. So that,
to be fair, if we ever would need a database, or if we would never want to have, more persistently, we always could, can add another field in database, right? Or not. Yes, not because you don't know which template was there, so it won't be accurate. Yeah, it's better to decide beforehand. But I mean, for me, I feel it would be kind of fine, because it's still user is not managing backend in any way. So that Cinder knows where to find it on the backend doesn't mean the backend will always keep organized like that. There still should be some kind of responsibility for operator for that. But again, I mean, if you would be more, I don't know, if you think that we should go with another table and database, I think it's totally fine.
Yeah, I just don't know. It's just
I'm really open to suggestions, because my main goal is not actually how to preserve it or something, but actually to have ability to be more flexible and eventually allow users to, allow some kind of backup tiering or something like that. Because I mean, you could do some kind of backup availability zones, and they will be stored on a different storage, and then you can also I mean, anyway, it's too much details, I guess, but yeah,
I guess it's one of those things where it's as long as we think this is safe to go forward with, we could always add more functionality if people want it. I don't know. I guess I've come around to thinking this is probably okay.
Does this have any impact on backup import? for the import export stuff?
Well, the thing that would be exported is going to contain the thing that's in the database. So if the template changes between the export and the import, then unless the stuff is moved in the back end, you won't be able to find it. But otherwise, I don't think it does. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I was just trying to follow through the implications there. So I think the idea is basically if you're going to use backup, export, and import, and you're not changing anything on the back end, then you need to make sure that your templates are set the same.
Yeah, because what's happening is, like, so the user says, I want to put my stuff in container Fred. What actually happens is we take Fred, we slap it through the template, and come up with Fred WQ whatever, and that's the container. Now, when if we do the export for the backup, the metadata will have Fred in it. So as long as somebody remembers what the template was, you can find the stuff.
And if it's wrong, it'll fail to import, so you'll notice.
Yeah, you just won't be able to find anything. Yeah. So I don't, so it'll be bad in the sense that your stuff has disappeared, but yeah. I guess the problem with the, having the display name and the actual container name is that you'll have to update those if you do change the template and move the stuff. But I don't know.
Yeah, so if you need to move stuff, you would need to update database.
Yeah. So this way, you can change the template. As long as the operator makes the container, you're fine. And then the stuff's got to be moved into that container, or else those backups won't be found anymore. And as far as the end user is concerned, they just wanted their backups put in container Fred, and that's where they think they are.
Yep, exactly.
So I think, so Dimitri, I think the one update would be, we need to check on Eric's concern about the import and export. I mean, I'm talking very glibly, but we do need to verify that. But I think it's going to work the way I described. So I think that's fine.
So part of this seems to assume that the generated container name is sensitive or private or something, but it's not really spelled out.
I
who are we
don't know.
trying to hide that from when? Sorry, somebody's internet did something there.
I don't know if it was sensitive. Oh, Dimitri, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, it can contain some private paths on the storage, which you probably not always want to expose. But my biggest concern is that when user asks Fred and receives something weird in return to his answer, it kind of looks confusing for the user. Because when I'm asking to do one thing and then instantly I got, okay, yeah, I did a different thing for you. It's just kind of inconsistent from user perspective.
Yeah.
All right, we've run quite a bit over. Where are we on this? Do we need more?
Well, so far, I guess that import text should be verified, which I will do, but
yeah, I think I've come around to thinking this is okay. Just it puts a lot of stuff on the operator if they want to use this, but I guess that's by default.
It is optional. It's completely optional.
Yeah.
We're not changing any historical capabilities.
Yeah. And I can see how it would be a really useful thing to have. So I think I'm going to be okay with this.
yeah, again, I am totally open to add a database label if we think that it was like worth it. I would be totally fine with it. Just like let me know or something. Okay, then thanks a lot for your time.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dimitri.
All right. Next and final topic for today's session: CBT-based backup spec.
Sadly, I have to drop in like 4 minutes, and this was the one I was waiting for.
How important is it to you, Simon? Do you want to try to do some continuation tomorrow or something, or you want to just? I'll just try to take good notes. And was that sufficient?
Yeah, take good notes. So I've put a whole bunch of comments on the spec already because we were in the process of building out something like this anyway, and then Hong put his stuff on there, which is great. So a whole bunch of comments in there because we've been thinking about this for a while. So yeah.
Do you have any questions or ideas that are blockers or like big things that?
I've put them in the spec comments. There's things on my concerns are like, if we're going to name NetApp, is NetApp going to be done as part of this whole thing, or is that required for NetApp to do the work? If not, then take NetApp out or mention other vendors that can utilize this stuff as well, and don't make it feel like it's only for one vendor or Ceph. There's a whole bunch of stuff about scalability I've put in there as well. There's major scale issues with this if we're not careful.
Okay. Well, with that, Hong, you have the floor.
I'll drop now. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, Simon.
So are we talking about this a bit?
We are talking about the CBT based backup spec, which is in the Etherpad online 111. Hong was here earlier, but he may have suffered from attrition from the backup template discussion. I don't know. We'll give him a minute. It's possible he just stepped away, and let me see if just ping him on IRC through.
Yeah. Hi, I'm here. I'm home.
Great. You're free to present and start the discussion. Go ahead.
Just 1 minute. Or not.
Oh no, you can take more than 1 minute. Take more the time you need.
Oh, okay, thank you. Let me introduce myself. My name is Inyoung. I'm from Samsung SDS. And I'm leading the Cinder M1 team at Samsung SDS. We really want to use Cinder's incremental backup feature in production, but the performance problem. So I propose spec adding CVT, change block tracking interface to Cinder backup. The idea is simple. Through the backend like SAP RBD already know exactly which blocks changes between snapshots through APIs like deep iterate. Instead of scanning everything, Cinder should just ask the backend and read only what changed. The existing SAP backend driver already does this, but only for SAP to SAP backup. So our goal is to extend this to general backup targets like Swiftboot, S3, and SAP RGW. The key design points are the volume driver expose or get CVT extend interface, the chunk the driver detect it, and take the CVT path, and if anything goes wrong, it automatically falls back to the existing full scan. No database schema changes are needed. We track the reference points in backup metadata. To be honest, I'm still learning the deep internal ops in the backup. I started this as an idea, wrote a log spec. Actually, if any core developer are interested in reading this, please feel free to take it. If not, my team at Samsung SDS is willing to step up and do the work. So I'd like to hear any thoughts or concern from the community about does this problem resonate with you, and is this the right direction to solve it?
Yeah, I got a couple of thoughts here. So, I mean, the idea makes sense, right? This is about optimizing incremental backups and enabling them to only back up what you need to back up. This proposed solution is, I'm not sure if it's what's traditionally meant by changed block tracking. I mean, it sort of is, but that can mean different things. So the proposal here is that we think that storage backends will be able to have some API that can tell us what blocks have changed since snapshot X was taken, or date X, or something. There is a completely different proposal for how to achieve this that's been floated for a couple of years now as well, which is to track changed blocks from the Nova side on the VM, where they have some APIs that can give that kind of info, and use that to retrieve the list of what blocks you need to back up for an attached volume, instead of relying on the backend to support this. Which one of those is better probably depends a lot on how many backends actually have this capability. I don't know the answer to that. I couldn't really take a guess at how many backends we have that have an API that lets you ask how many or which blocks have changed since some previous marker.
Okay, that sounds like a great idea. Please share any relevant references, and I will keep looking to them.
Well, I think Simon pointed out that we're not going to be able to store changed block lists in database metadata as it exists currently, because they're going to be huge.
So you think it doesn't work?
Well, I'm sure there's a way to do it. I'm just not sure what the correct way is at the moment. I'm also not sure if we even need to store the well, so when you create one of these backups, I built backup software one time that did this exact thing, and so I'm trying to think through like how this should work.
Maybe you could use much larger block size so you have a maximum amount of data that can be spent, and that way the database wouldn't get overloaded. So you'd still have like a more incremental backup, but it wouldn't be a perfect incremental backup.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think this is inventing a new backup format, right? Because currently, most of our backups, well, they can be a few different things, I guess. They could be split into a bunch of S3 objects or files in NFS. But the difference with this one is that they're not going to be a whole volume, right? You're going to have sorry, I'm going around. I haven't quite gotten to the point I'm trying to make. I guess when you create one of these incremental backups using this method, you're going to store a big list of what the blocks are and where they go, and then all the blocks as well. How well it works to store the block list in the database, I'm not really sure. I mean, Simon did some quick math in here saying it could end up with 20 megabytes of a block list for one backup.
Why do we need to store the change log in the database? That does not sound like a intuitive idea.
I think it's because this spec kind of dances around what it's really doing, which is that the new backup format is all of the blocks that changed and where to put them when you do a restore. It's not obvious, though, that the where to put them part should be in the database. That's kind of one of the things I'm wondering about, is why persist it in the database instead of just putting it into the backup store. Because if you're going to use the backend to query the change list for each incremental anyway, you don't need it in the database. because you only need it when you're doing the restore. You don't actually use it for doing backups.
Here's maybe a softball question. If we're doing incremental backups with only the change blocks, how does that differ from just taking a copy on write snapshot of a volume? It's not really a backup because it doesn't stand on its own. It's a bit more of it does depend on the volume from which it was created. So,
well,
what are we gaining here?
It doesn't depend on the volume. It depends on, you first take a full backup and put it in the backup storage.
Right.
And you take incremental updates after that. And there's a bunch of strategies that go into that, because some backup systems will try to do one full backup and then incremental forever, which takes a lot of machinery to make that work.
Yeah, a lot of solutions will roll those up periodically. And so you take incrementals regularly, and then at some point you roll them into a fully constituted.
Yeah, I think we probably would be starting with just assuming there's going to be a full and then a chain of incrementals for a week or two, and then do another full, which is not, the best thing, but you have to get into a lot of data processing stuff to combine your incrementals and synthesize new full backups out of them, which we could do, but I don't know.
So then, just a general question would be, does this have a place in Cinder? Is this consistent with our execution model and our APIs and what we're trying to expose?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does, and it's a feature that some people are going to really want and expect to be there. I mean, this falls in that category of, you've been able to do this forever with VMware. Why can't I do it with OpenStack? Kind of stuff.
Yeah, Simon sounds very excited, and that is a rare thing. So,
but I really don't know if the complexity of so if we assume that there's a bunch of storage backends that can even give you this data, which I don't know if there are or not, but even if we assume that and we build a new driver API that enables that in Cinder, is that actually better than doing the change tracking on the Nova side? I don't know. If you do it on the Nova side, it works for all the Cinder drivers, and you don't lose much. I mean, you have some things like if you detach the volume, you have to restart the chain, but I mean, most of this stuff is aiming to back up volumes that are in use for quite a long time, I think.
Is it possible to have like a front end and back end CVT like we do for QoS?
Oh, I'm sure it's possible.
I mean, the front end and back end QoS operate at different granularities. Like CBT would be, it's universal. The block on that volume either changed or didn't. So presumably, if everything's implemented correctly, it should yield the exact same result.
Well, except if you if you're using multi-attach, I don't know how you do it on the Nova side. It would be very complicated.
You'd have to sum all of the CBTs across all of the attached hosts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there delivered API for this CBT on the Nova side? Like, how does it work on?
You basically tell libvirt that I want to keep track of blocks that change, just starting from some point in time, I think. So you would
presumably from the moment of making it available, so you capture all of them.
Yeah, well, and the problem is, since you're doing it with libvirt, anytime you detach the volume, you don't know what's happened. So you have to restart the chain when you do a detach.
Well, if all of the libvirt instances agree to be consistent, then you could make the assumption, but that would require that your entire compute deployment was uniform and all implemented the same way. You couldn't mix and match.
And I don't know if, presumably when you do, I mean, if you migrate the instance, you might have to restart it then too. I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking of similar cases where we live migrate and then it's a different hypervisor.
Because QEMU is what's keeping track of this stuff while it's running.
But when we live migrate an instance, isn't there a way to like pass on this as metadata as well, along with?
I have no idea if that's part of instance migration or not. Maybe it does it already. I don't know.
Presumably, if it has the ability to capture and know this stuff, it also has the ability to convey that as part of the migration handoff. I have no idea where that is in terms of maturity and functionality, but that's where it would live.
Yeah, Nova might not support it today, but at least like the libvirt should be able to do something like that, I think.
But then we also, if we do it on the Cinder side, we can support some bare metal use cases that you can't do with anything else. You could also conceive of games with consistency groups and stuff like that. I don't know.
But we can't store the changelog in the database. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't think that's what we would want to do.
We've got to find another place to put that.
In this spec, it says it will be stored as backup metadata. Like, I don't think database is mentioned anywhere.
Yeah, but you have to figure out, like, does that mean you have to modify each backup driver to now store this somewhere?
What if you created a scratch volume on the back end that's just specifically for Cinder's use?
Well, then you get into stuff where you can't do backup, import, and export.
I think the idea in spec is like to change chunk backup driver and all drivers inherit from it. So we can have a generic implementation for like the reference point dictionary or the JSON object. I was confused about like this. So there is a method that we need to implement in all all volume drivers, like get CBT extends, where it would tell the diff from like one snapshot to another. I mean, the destination snapshot is clearly the volume we are trying to back up, but what would be the source? Like, so I know at least in case of Ceph, I think each snapshot points to one backup. There is a snapshot copy, which we can fetch. But does it apply to other backup drivers as well, where there is a two snapshot?
Not currently. So the proposal there is implying that each time we do a backup, we're going to leave a snapshot on the back end. Some backends might not need that. I don't know. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could build a storage backend that would let you just do it by date or something. I don't know. I assume most storage backends do this relative to snapshots, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, at least for the vendor drivers, like maybe NetApp and Simon mentioned about Pure, like this CBT calculation on the volume driver side, like on the backend side, shouldn't have any overhead. So
well, because if you're doing it based on snapshots, your backend is already kind of doing this for most backends. The main question is just whether they give you an API that lets you see it.
I mean, I only see Anthony, so I would ask about Hitachi. Like, does this exist as a feature in Hitachi? Like, Hitachi driver, does that allow it?
To like query the change blocks? No.
Okay.
My concern is that if most backends can't do this, then it's not great. If we only can do it on like 1 or 2 pieces of hardware, then it's not a very good feature.
But if you can do it on Ceph, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we basically do it on stuff now.
So,
I mean, we do it on like the RBD driver, volume driver with the Ceph backup driver. But I think this is proposing it like if I want to back up a RBD volume on Swift or S3, it will allow CBT for that as well.
Yeah.
right. So as long as your source volume is stored in Ceph, then you would get something out of this.
Or NetApp or Pure. I mean, they do
Right.
support it, they want to implement it. I mean, this might not be a foolproof solution for the whole CBT problem, but I mean, it is one solution among many that seems feasible. So if we have like an option for the deployer or the consumer to like opt in for different solution based on their usage, at least this is like something that would be useful.
Well, this also, I think there are other use cases that are not spelled out in this spec, meaning I'm pretty sure there are some people who don't care if you can do this with Cinder backup, but who want the API for the volume side so that they can get this and use an external backup software to back up Cinder volumes efficiently. The target of it is likely not just Cinder backup.
Yeah, I think solutions like Commvault and others, I mean, they have really slow backup process, and they also utilize like sometimes computes local storage to store like the intermediate backup before putting it into the actual object storage. So yeah, I mean, for them it would be really useful. Yeah, I like the idea of exposing it as an API. But how will this be consumed? Like if we get, I mean, is it like the same JSON blob we will get for 2 snapshots, and then, I mean, it will be a whole another implementation on the backup solution side to consume this API?
Yeah, it probably should be kind of 2 separate efforts. Because this doesn't talk at all about the API stuff.
Yeah, I think at this point it is just for internal consumption of Cinder backup. I mean, given we have no solution at this point for CBT, like I think this is a good idea from my perspective.
Yeah, I think it is. I There's probably a lot of detailed scenarios we'll have to pick through that aren't in here too. Like, I don't know. Well, we need to talk to some backends and see how many can do this and make sure that the whole API of basing it on snapshots is what everyone actually wants.
Yeah, I would hope for more vendor attendance at their application topics, so maybe we can start asking about this more.
Yeah, that's a good idea. But since SAP supports it, I think it would be better to implement it for SAP first. You might really have to include other backends as well. Those silence means I know.
Eric, objections? Like, do we have any? What do we need to be able to move forward, or at least be in a place where we're willing to review specs? Like, are we at the stage where we can review specs, or is there fundamental questions that need to be sorted out?
We could probably review the spec. I'd really like to know that somebody other than just Pure is gonna do this.
Is NetApp another candidate?
Well, that seemed unclear from the questions in the spec. I don't know that anyone from NetApp has said that they actually can or will do this.
And Young, do you have clarity on that? Like, is NetApp mentioned like theoretically, or are they actually like a test subject?
I'm not sure if it's actually possible on that app. It was just my thought.
It looks like NetApp, for at least some of their products, has a snapdiff API that exposes this kind of stuff so that vendors like Veeam and Commvault can use it. So it looks like maybe it's at least possible for some NetApp stuff. We'd have to get someone to actually implement it.
If NetApp doesn't support it, I'm planning to remove it from the spec.
It sounds like we don't have any blockers that would require a PTG session. Like, it sounds like we should be able to iterate through the spec and maybe in the weekly meetings, without requiring like an all hands kind of thing. And so at least in the sense of are there blockers, it sounds like there's no major philosophical hurdles to clear at the moment, which I think essentially means like you're free to move forward and see if we can reach a consensus. And
yeah, it would be a great thing to have in Cinder, I think. But we're gonna need a whole spec designing a REST API for this.
yeah, it's going to be some work for sure, but it's doable. It sounds like it's at least in keeping with what we're trying to do. All right. Is that all we want to? Is that all we need to cover on this topic? That puts us at the end of today's agenda. We're only 33 minutes over.
So is there anyone who can take the lead on this? If there is a lot to do, I'd prefer if someone else could handle it.
Well, I think there's a few people interested in this whole thing. So we should probably see what kind of engagement Simon was looking for, since he sounded like he was about to do a bunch of stuff with this.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, and then in terms of moving it along, so you can revise the spec based on Simon's comments and some of what you heard today. And then I don't know if the Cinder weekly meeting is good for your time zone, but you can sort of like check in there to make sure people are reviewing and getting comments. Then we'll probably have a mid-cycle or two. So
at least one.
Yeah. So it's another possibility to get more comments, but I guess what I'm saying is don't be afraid to like ask at the weekly meeting, have people taking a look yet, and make sure you're getting timely feedback.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to stay in the loop on this one. I used to live in this world of backup stuff, so happy to get into it here.
Okay, I will check Simon's review and either leave or reply or make some revision. Thanks.
Sounds good. Yeah, with Simon as interested in this as he is, he could be a good ally in terms of bouncing ideas back and forth and working through some of the more technical points. At least he's somebody that you have as a resource. All right, we're done for the day unless anyone has anything else.
Should stop the recording.
I'm assuming that means no one has anything else.
No, sounds good.
Anthony.
I was just messing with you.
Oh, nice.